Well, January was a busy month for Premier Wab Kinew. There were the usual New Year announcements from the provincial government.
The Premier keeps talking about cutting grocery prices, and now here's one small way he can do exactly that. The price for a litre of milk was supposed to rise this year by 4 cents, but after the province spoke to the regulator, it's holding the price at around $2 depending on the fat content. Kinew admits it won't make a major difference, but he calls it a win-win for everyone.
Dairy farmer is still going to get an increase. The wholesaler, they're going to get the increase, but the margin that you pay, that's where we're going to see the squeeze happening. So you won't have to pay more, but also the farmer will still be getting enough to cover their considerations, like around their cost of doing business.
But the Premier also made headlines on the national front. He had a public back and forth with Ontario leader Doug Ford over Crown Royal whiskey.
This is a Gimli-made drink for sipping, drinking, and to appreciate.
Crown Royal is mashed, distilled, and bottled at this Diageo plant north of Gimli. The distillery is one of the biggest businesses in the Interlake, and business is good for Canadian whiskey after some provinces pulled U.S. bourbon off the shelves. Now, Ontario plans to remove Crown Royal from LCBO stores because Diageo is moving a bottling plant from Amherstburg to the United States.
Sure as I'm talking to you, that Crown Royal is coming off the shelves.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford famously poured Crown Royal out last fall and is following through on his threat to make Diageo whiskey sales evaporate in Ontario. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew urges him to reconsider.
So I understand Premier Ford has his different priorities that he's working on, but when we're talking about Team Canada, we have to stay united across the provinces. And having a Team Canada approach can't mean targeting jobs in another province.
The two premiers spoke by phone today, but Ford is hanging tough.
No, I'm not reconsidering. And Crown Royal, Diageo, they should have thought of it. Who goes after their best customer? No one does. We were their number one customer in the entire world, and they wanted to come after us and close down a plant and have people lose their jobs.
Back in Gimli, Mayor Cha didn't want to say anything to antagonize Ford, but he stressed how important the Diageo plant is to Gimli.
Oh, that's probably our worst kept secret, is how proud we are of Crown Royal.
The Premier was asked repeatedly about the economic impact on Manitoba if Doug Ford follows through on his plan to remove Crown Royal from Ontario's shelves. Kinew said that was a hypothetical, but promised there would be no tit-for-tat removal of Ontario-made liquor products from Manitoba liquor shelves.
Kinew even turned his attention south of the border with a message for the President of the United States after 2 protesters were killed in Minnesota following the clashes with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE agents.
Mr. Trump, stop killing American citizens. The idea of trying to protect Americans from the bad parts of immigration by killing American citizens doesn't make any sense. We're going to get a trade deal. We're going to do business with the U.S. But we also have to be able to speak with integrity and look at ourselves in the mirror at the end of this. And at a time when you're seeing terrible things like are happening right next to us, we have to speak out.
And then he also went to Ottawa, representing the province at the First Minister's meeting, and had this viral moment.
And I love the fact that we come out here at every press conference, and there's always, trying to find the divisions and trying to find the things that we're not united on. They want there to be a heated rivalry between Doug Ford and I. But we're on the same team.
I want you to
We're going into the corners together.
I want you to just
right?
take
We're
that
playing
image.
For Team Canada.
The heated rivalry between Doug Ford and Wab Kinew.
And we're on the same team as well, Mr. Prime Minister. So if you want to lace up the skates, we're going up to Churchill next week, and you're more than welcome to join us as we build up this country, the true north, strong and free.
Thank you, Premiers. This puts an end to our press conference. This qui met fin de conférence de presse.
There's no topping Premier Kinew.
I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Manitoba. And with all of the hot takes and social media moments from the Premier in January, I had some questions for him. We sat down for a conversation about some of the big issues impacting life in this province. I started by asking for more details about another big announcement that he actually made coming out of that Premier's meeting when he shared the news that the province has a lead on its plans to expand the Port of Churchill. A major energy company's expressed interest in investing, he has told us. Now, we've talked about the project on the podcast before. It would include, as you may recall, port expansion, an upgraded Hudson Bay Railway, and an all-weather road to Churchill, which they've wanted for a long time, and potentially an energy corridor to ship oil and gas through Arctic waters. Premier Kinew told me that the interest is from a Canadian company. And while he couldn't share too many details, he did say that he sees this as an exciting opportunity.
It's really amazing to see the interest because of the threats to our independence, the tariffs that we've been facing from not just the U.S., but also China, but also this desire among Canadians to build up our economy. So we have this great opportunity in the north of our province because we have tidewater. We can get to oceans and then connect to others around the world. And it's just a really exciting time for our province to see this thing that people have talked about for 100 years or more now actually be just maybe a few steps away from some pretty major investments. So yeah, we were up there just a couple days ago in Churchill, also meeting with the area communities at a central point in Thompson. And again, openness, concerns for sure on the environmental side. Also, how is this going to help local cost of living, local housing, social services, protection for women and girls to make sure issues like trafficking are going to be prevented. So definitely a lot to look at, but all part of a pretty interesting time.
I think what I'll ask you, and I know obviously you're not going to say anything that you can't until there's ink on a deal. How close are you to being able to tell us more?
Well, we're working with the federal government. They've set up their major projects office, and through the major projects office, we've hired an outside consultant to do what they call market sounding. So they're going to go out and test the market so that we can figure out what's real in terms of, you listed energy products. We've already been doing agriculture and some critical minerals. There's probably the Northern Resupply sending goods up to Nunavut. So they're going to put that all together and kind of try to separate fact from fiction, if you will. Which of these is a real economic opportunity for our province to pursue through Churchill or Hudson Bay more generally? And we're supposed to get that back in April or May. So not saying that we'll necessarily announce a specific company going into the spring, but we should have more information to share in greater detail.
Is there one company only right now that's sort of in the game? Seriously?
Well, if you look at what I would say, no, there's a few, just to answer directly. But
Okay.
To give a bit of context here, when you look at the West Coast, where they've done some pretty big projects, including some that have First Nations or Indigenous governments owning a significant piece of the equity, it's usually like a consortium. So there might be one big company that's sort of the lead investor, but you'll typically see like maybe a dozen companies because these projects are so huge. And then it also opens up the ability to export for all these various companies. So again, not saying that that's necessarily where things will go here in Manitoba, but it might make sense in the future if we are going to pursue something really big that there might be a lead proponent and then a bunch of other companies working together with them.
Just last on Churchill, regarding ice breaking that would, make shipping year-round, you've asked Ottawa to fast-track the Transport Canada paperwork required for the icebreaker feasibility study up there.
Yes.
And these are icebreakers. People shouldn't be thinking of like the Red River icebreakers. We're talking
The
like
Alphabex, no.
Yeah, we're talking like
Different.
military
Yeah.
grade, year-round shipping here. Have you heard anything back on that front about are they fast-tracking this? When are we going to understand if they can open year-round?
So the paperwork should be done this week. The Prime Minister, Prime Minister Carney was very supportive of this. He's excited by everything coming together relatively quickly. The study itself, probably the fall is when we'll have that one in our hands.
I also went on to ask the Premier about his government's decision not to give disaster aid to Steinbach residents who were hit hard by flooding last fall. The city saw more than 103 millimeters of rainfall in just 4 hours between September 11th and 12th. Now, by the time the skies cleared, Environment and Climate Change Canada said a total of 135 millimeters had fallen. Now, for perspective here, the typical average for that area is less than half of that amount for the entire month. Steinbach City Council applied to the province's Disaster Financial Assistance Program, as you can imagine, on behalf of the 200 property owners affected the most. But the province denied their claim. The response? Most of the reported damage was insurable, and the weather didn't cause widespread damage, they said, or disruption to essential assets or essential services. Steinbach City Council is asking the province for answers, including more clarity around the thresholds to qualify. So I asked the Premier about the decision. Here's what he told me.
Well, when I was reading the media reports, I actually did go into the office that day and said, let's do it. Why aren't we doing this? And so we've had our emergency measures organization, EMO, who takes the lead on natural disasters and events like this one. And they looked into the situation, and insurance is available in the area. Now, that doesn't mean that every single insurance company, like your existing insurance company, if you live in Steinbach, is going to offer overland insurance. But maybe that means you got to find a better company, one that's actually going to work with your family or your business. I don't know. So that's part of it. And then so for us to look in at something like DFAA, which is a federal program, but of course the province has the role of triggering it or assembling municipalities together to trigger it. In that case, once we looked at what is actually insurable, there's not really much left there. So again, I recognize that there's a challenge for folks because insurance companies are maybe stepping back when they should be stepping up. But the role for government in this, it's tough to find a policy grounding for us to take action. But again, my heart goes out to people. I've asked what we can do. We'll continue to look at this. If there's more we can, we'll certainly be willing to look at that.
How concerning is it that people in Manitoba aren't able to easily insure their homes and properties against some natural disasters, especially things like flooding and water backup, things that we see frequently here?
Yeah, I think that's an important question for the industry because, again, having our emergency measures folks look at it, this is insurable. You can get insurance for this. So why is it that not every homeowner's insurance policy could add this on to their package? So maybe we're actually looking at more of a consumer affairs type of angle here. So again, this is probably some more digging for us to do. But insurance for homes and businesses for overland flooding is available generally in Steinbach, even after these rain events. So I think for us now, the question is, what can we do to support the homeowners, support the business so that they can connect with that? And if, I recognize it can be a bit of a headache to switch policyholders, but I think that's something that we're going to have to look at.
Well, get your calculators out for this next section, people, because the other thing that the Premier and I talked about is the current model for municipalities in this province to generate revenue. Last time on the podcast, we talked about the City of Winnipeg's proposed property assessments for 2027. So many homeowners say that the estimates were shocking and seemed inflated. Some residents went on to suggest that the model for funding is actually the problem. Many Canadian municipalities, you might know, run on tight budgets, so Winnipeg is no exception. As of December, the city projected a $17.4 million deficit for the end of 2025. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, though, did a study looking at what they say would give cities more stable funding to help with things like infrastructure. They found that cities could beef up their operating budgets by levying local income taxes on high-income earners. But right now, they don't have the power to do that. I spoke with CCPA Director Molly McCracken about what that alternative funding model would look like.
Property taxes are the bulk of the revenue for the City of Winnipeg right now. So if governments were to, because you would need the permission of the federal or provincial government to do this in partnership with cities, introduce a new income tax bracket at the top end. So the proposal in this report is to give municipalities access to personal income taxes for those earning $246,000 or more per year at a 1% rate. So that could leave, for example, $16 million more for the City of Winnipeg, which is about the amount of the deficit for this year for the city.
Would higher income earners, do you think, be inclined to leave municipalities that would tax their income?
No, there's research on this. An increase such as 1% or not a large amount is not a driver of people leaving where they live. There's many reasons why people stay or leave somewhere, family, work, and also we do have a fairly low cost of living here in Manitoba comparative to other places. So, this would not force people to leave Winnipeg.
Is anywhere else in Canada, using this model successfully? I mean, obviously, we're probably going to Quebec for the closest, right?
Yes, there's no municipality currently in Manitoba in Canada using this. Quebec has a portion of the PST. 1% of the PST goes to municipalities. And also Saskatchewan provides a portion of the PST. And that's important because, the retail sales tax or income tax is a growth-based tax so that when the economy grows, it increases every year. Property taxes are a stable source of revenue, but they don't necessarily grow every year. That's why, we go through this ritual where the city every year has to come out and say, we are going to increase property taxes by, whatever percent in order to meet the budgetary needs of the city to make the city run, which creates this situation where it's in the spotlight every time. And it's also the political whims of the provincial government here. For example, income to the municipalities was frozen during most of the time period of the previous provincial government. This provincial government is increasing it by 2% per year, but still municipalities need more revenue to respond to emerging needs, homelessness, and other things we're seeing in our city.
If Saskatchewan is one of the provinces, I'm just looking next door here, that has 1% of the PST come back to the cities, is that something that you would like to see here as well? Like, is that just as stable as asking for what you were mentioning with looking at taxing higher income earners?
Yes, that's another model. That's a growth-based model. That was a big part of the discussion with the New Deal for cities, and municipalities have been pushing for some sort of growth-based tax revenue for years and years and years. The percentage of personal income tax on high-income earners is one example, or a portion of the PST is another.
Do you know that if a portion of the PST here would equal in Winnipeg $16 million? Because that's the number we have for the other model, or
much more. It would be about $300 million.
Yeah. In terms of the Association of Manitoba Municipalities, they say that municipalities already get less than 10% of every tax dollars, even though they own 60% of infrastructure when they're outlining their arguments. So they say, why should we start taking people's income taxes? Instead, we should demand a fair share of the taxes that are already collected. This is the model we're discussing right now. What do you think of their perspective?
Well, they are trying to move forward what's needed for cities with crumbling infrastructure and complex needs. The tax conversation is always a hard one. And what a modest proposal this report by CCPA suggests is that high-income earners have done quite well. Stocks are rising. They can afford to pay a little bit more because they have that disposable income. And we need to look at a high-income earner tax increase that can go to cities and other needs in our community.
Well, the Premier lives in Winnipeg, as do I, so we each got those property tax assessments in this city. So I decided to put the CCPA's numbers to him. He shared his take on the idea of changing the municipal funding structure to one that gives access to a portion of personal income taxes.
Well, I'm not crazy about this proposal because cost of living, and I'm not really into raising taxes. We've tried to cut taxes, including the gas tax, income taxes, payroll tax, corporate tax. But when you talk about the funding for the city and other municipalities, I think we've done a lot there. We heard the call from municipal leaders saying that they wanted growth revenue, so we created a growth revenue fund. They get now a share of the provincial gas tax revenue that comes in. We've committed to operating funding that increases every year. So again, every municipality is able to plan over a 4-year time horizon, knowing that they're going to get increases. And then we got the infrastructure funding, like the strategic infrastructure basket, which is about $100 million annually for the city of Winnipeg, not to mention special avenues for funding. In the CBC web reports today, you have the RSR project in southeast Manitoba. That's something that we're involved in. Here in the city of Winnipeg, you've got the North End Water Pollution Control Center.
Yeah, those are projects, of course, yeah.
But I think it's significant to understand, if you look at the North End Water Treatment Plant, for instance, we spent all of our bandwidth with the federal government in the last year of Trudeau's time in office in order to get that money, right? Like, it's $500 million. Yep. This is a huge amount of investment that's coming into the city.
I'm
just going
to interject because I want to push back on another plan then. So another idea is you talked about the portion of the gas tax, but for stable funding for cities, I mean, Saskatchewan does 1% dedicated from their PST. Quebec does that too, 2 cities. Is that something that you would look at?
Well, anytime you look at existing provincial revenues, the question is, which emergency room do you want to close?
So you pit it against healthcare spending.
Well, this money is currently supporting our hospitals, which we're making progress on hiring up. It's money that goes to supporting schools. You're about to see the school funding announcement where we're going to give increases to every school division.
So Saskatchewan can manage it. We just don't have the money.
Well, we did just give them growth revenue.
Yeah, but this is just more stable. Like 1% would, I think Molly McCracken was talking about, that would be like $300 million a year.
I don't know. And then if we do that, then everything's good for forever and ever. I think the point that I'm making is we have provided a new source of growth revenue within the past year. No government in the province's history has ever done that before. We've done more on operating. We've done more on infrastructure funding. So again, cost of living is important, and I want to make sure that we're taking a balanced approach here. So we got to look out for the affordability for you, the taxpayer, but also we got to invest in the future with infrastructure and funding for services. And so we've stepped up with things like that too, like the Community Connections program that was cut at the downtown library. We stepped in to fund that as well.
Well, that is it for today. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for listening to This is Manitoba. As always, we'll be back with a new episode next week.